everybody. Welcome to a Millinery Studio live stream. My name is Ilona, I'm a milliner based in London, and today I'm going to be talking about DIY hat blocks. I hope everybody is doing well today. Can I have a mic and audio check? Is everything working? Oh, let's turn on some music. How's that music doing? I've got Matthew in the chat, who is the moderator today. Hopefully everything is working. Testing. I'm going to assume that everything's working fine. Great, Matthew says everything sounds good. Right, shall we make a start? As usual, I like to start with a little preview of the video that I'm currently working on, which will be released next week, and that's this pillbox that I've just plonked on top of my head and it's perching there quite happily. This is a tweed, a boucle covered pillbox, which will be in the next video. The next video will be all about making 4 or 5 pillboxes, depending on how much time I have, and how they're all kind of a similar method, but you can achieve lots of different styles through it. So here's the preview. Oh, hello, Traina. Hello. We'll just be staying for a little bit. That's fine. The stream will be available on demand afterwards, so you can always join back in, watch it back later from whenever you have to leave. Right. That's the preview. I'm going to take it off my head because I thought that today, as I show you the various hat blocks that I've made, I'll also try on the hats that I've made on them, just to give you a bit of an idea of what kind of shape suits what styles. So I'm going to take the orange off. There we go. And this is it. The inside's not finished yet, so I've still got work to do on that one. Right. I'm going to jump straight in today with a cardboard hat block. So this is a cardboard hat block made out of a type of cardboard that's not corrugated cardboard. So it's not the stuff that parcels and packages come in. It's a special type of cardboard that is kind of fibrous all the way through the inside. The brand name for it is sometimes known as Escabord, and it's also known as paperboard, grey board, mounting board, which is different to mounting foam. So it's paper based, it's not foam based. And the pluses of that is that you can make it curve rather nicely. So when you have a join in a pattern that you've made flat and you join it up, it will have a nice curve like this to it. And in the edges, all this masking tape, all this stuff that makes it look a bit kind of homemade, which it is, the masking tape is there holding in 2 bits of wire. And the hat that I've blocked on this is this one right here. This is from my last video. It was the Trilby bucket hat made on a standard crown block and the DIY cardboard block. So if I pop that on my head to give you a little idea of what it looks like and get it straight on, there we go. So it's the brim that we're focusing on in this particular hat. Just reiterate the point that it was made on this. So will it fit over the top? No, because it's obviously blocked from underneath. The way this was blocked is it just sat on top like this, on top of something propping it up so that you can pull the felt over it. And I would say that the cardboard isn't particularly great for felt. It would have definitely been easier to block some straw or maybe even some buckram, something that doesn't need too much pulling over it, because it's not, look, I can bend it like this. It's not the strongest, most reinforced thing in the world, but it will do in a pinch. And the plus to this is that you can make this from a flat pattern. So if you've watched my last video, which was on this, that's what I did there. In fact, let me see if I can share my screen and just quickly skip through bits of that of last week's video where I flat patterned this. Let's see, will this work? Oh. Hopefully you can see my screen, because now I can't see you. So, making a cardboard block. So if I play it, it's on mute. I'll just talk over it a little bit. So this is the process of making the flat pattern. You start with the head size. You draw on whatever the widest point of the brim you want. So in my case, it was 10 centimeters. So I've got this quilting ruler that's 5 centimeters wide. I just traced all the way around the head size oval. And if I skip through a little bit, you can go and watch the video later. Let's get to the bit where I'm doing this, which is, it's called the slash and spread method of pattern cutting. And essentially, if you think about like a pizza or anything round, and if you take a slice out of it, like a little triangle, and then you join those ends up, you'll go from a flat shape to a kind of curve, to an angle even, which is what this is. So if I hold this flat, you can see there's a curve over, not a curve, it's an angle, it's a straight angle that angles downwards. Of course, you can make it angle upwards, you can make one side angle down, one side angle up, by wherever you put your little pizza slices into it. Once you've decided visually what angle you want, you cut it back open, join it up, cut it flat. Oh, here's an interesting thing, is you can see as I was cutting it there, in fact, let me go back a second, there we go. I'm cutting off a big chunk over here where the mouse cursor is, and it's kind of tapering off to nothing at the other side of the semicircle. And the reason for that is if I turn to the side, hopefully you can still hear me okay, the back, I always like to make the back slightly shorter than the front, and I've also angled it slightly flatter. So the front is kind of pointing more downwards, and the back is coming out a little bit flatter. And the reason for that is you want to accommodate your hair, neck, and upper back curve. So as you can see, I've got a bun under this hat, and this is accommodating that bun, because if it was flat, if I put it on the other way, wear the hat the wrong way around, it's the bun is kind of, you can see it's kind of making the hat fall flat over my eyes and I can't see anything. So if I now put it back on the correct way, you can see that it's no longer dipping down onto my face, because there's enough space for the bun to exist there. So I guess the point is when you're designing a hat and creating a hat, you want to think about what kind of hair or costume, even like if this was for a cosplay, if I had a big cape with like a standing up collar or big shoulder pads, I might need the headwear to accommodate, to give that space between the hat and the costume, or in my case the hat and the hair, because I tend to wear my hair in a bun. I always want to make sure that the hats that I make for myself, I accommodate my bun. Or if I had a client who maybe liked to wear their hair in braids, like in French braids or Dutch braids, that's where you've got the hair woven kind of tight onto the head, so it's not it's not the kind of plait that starts down here, it's the kind of plait that starts on top of your head and gives your head a bit of bulk over here. That's something that I'd want to incorporate into the hat as well, so into the head size, just to make sure that it's not too big, not too small. So just something to think about when you're designing and making. Let me switch back to, let me just quickly check the chat. Oh, this is gonna look weird on screen. Okay, let me switch back to the front camera and answer some questions. Oh, hi Marianne, lovely to see you. Michael says, I have so much hair, I almost always struggle with giving enough space for it, hashtag hat problems. Indeed, yes, so I don't have, unfortunately, the problem of a lot of hair, but my sister, who tried on one of my hats a couple of days ago. She has so much hair. She's so lucky. She's tall, she's blonde, she's young, she's got lots of hair, and she tried on one of my hats that I actually made for my mum. And my mum's got the same kind of head and hair shape as I do. So when I made my mum the hat, I made it like I would for myself. And then my sister said, oh, I want to try on the hat. And we put the hat on her head, and it kind of perched on top because obviously the hat for a start wasn't big enough because she does have a slightly bigger head, but also her hair, it's so bulky, it just got in the way. And she wears her hair in like a mid ponytail over here, and it's like that thick. It's, you know, it's, her hair is like the thickness of this water glass when it's in a ponytail. She's a lucky, lucky girl. But if I was making a hat for her, especially a hat like this, which is head-sized, I would definitely have to think about where that hair would go in the hat. Traina says, my hair is always down, thankfully. Well, that is definitely a way to get around it. But if your hair is always down, another thing you might want to think about with that is, I don't know how long your hair is, but if you've got very long hair and you've decided to curl it and give yourself lots of volume kind of around the shoulder and chest area, that's also something that you might need to think about with a hat as well. Not so much with a brimmed hat, but more with maybe a pillbox like this. So if you've got your hair down and it's all curly and you're putting on a pillbox, you've got to think about the balance of proportions. So if I had this pillbox on and my hair all curly all the way down here, I think it would look a bit funny. Like I don't really have any hair to add to myself, but let's say this is all my hair and it's kind of sticking out here. It will look a bit funny proportion-wise, especially if the curls are concentrating down here. And I would say that this pillbox is not the right kind of shape to wear with big fluffy hair. But if you wanted to wear a pillbox with big fluffy hair, then I would suggest you go with something smaller, because then you've got that balance of a tiny, tiny hat and then lots and lots of hair. So more of one, less of the other. Playing around is always good. Watch my hair get messier and messier as I progress through the stream with putting hats on and off my head. Right, so that's the cardboard block. I hope those who joined a little bit later on didn't miss anything, but just a quick recap. Cardboard, 2 bits of wire, galvanized wire, not millinery wire, just because it's cheaper. You can use millinery wire as well. And then masking tape to hold it in place, because there's no way you can stitch through the cardboard with a needle and thread. That would just be too painful on the fingers, and you'd blunt about 5 needles trying to do it. And then to keep them, my masking tape wasn't the best quality, so to keep it stuck down, I painted it over with PVA glue just to, I mean, that's got the added benefit of giving it slightly more structure, slightly waterproofing it, and also holding down all the masking tape. Michael says crown braids look great with a pillbox too. Oh, I've never tried that. I'm guessing by a crown braid you mean, is that the one that goes over the top like that? I do love that hairstyle. I don't have enough hair for that. Maybe that's something I should try on my sister. She'd probably look really good with a crown braid. And Trina says, my hair reaches to my back, so my pillbox hats are always supremely tiny. Yes, I think that will probably look absolutely stunning. Okay, I'm going to put this one to the side. And if you joined late and you're not watching live, but kind of pausing and stopping, if you have any questions at any point about any of the hats, just try and get my attention in the comments, and I can, I'm not putting these too far away, I can always whip them back out and hold them up on the camera a bit more. Oops. Right, let me take a sip of water. What's everyone drinking today? I've gone for water. No tea, no coffee. I'm feeling awake enough today. Right. Next hat block. That's this one over here, which is a Fos Shape hat block. Let me switch camera views So here is the Fos Shape. Hopefully that's all in focus. This is a bandeau shape. So if I show you the hat that was made on this hat block, that's this one. So this is wool felt covered in a bit of veiling, and it's been wired, and it's got a hat elastic in it. All it now needs is a trim. One day I'll get back to that. If you want to see how I trim this hat, I do have a video on when I finished another version of this in a light pink, I think I did. I think that's from my autumnal UFOs video, and as usual I will make a playlist after the stream with all the videos that I've mentioned in this stream so that you can go and have a look at what on earth I'm talking about. Back to the hat blocks. So this is Fos Shape. This is the shape that it's given. So how do you get to this stage? I started off with, I might as well put this on my head. Will it fit? There we go. There we go. Hide the messy hair. I started off for this Fos Shape with a Wireframe. This is another hat that I am currently working on. This is actually going to be a clone of this vintage hat. So it's a kind of, it's kind of got a bandeau front, but then a kind of callow half hat back. So it's like this, with a bit added onto the back. In fact, let me pop this one on just to give you an idea of the shape. This is what it looks like. I really love this shape on me. It's one of my favorite hat shapes. So as you can see, it's got that bandeau shape in the front, and that little thing there is the, is the callow half hat shape. Just covers a bit more head area. I personally like hats with a bit more coverage, but what you'll notice here, if I turn around, what's this? Can you guys see that gap? That's a gap to accommodate a bun. So this is a vintage hat that I didn't make, but clearly whoever made this 70 years ago had me in mind with my big bun at the back. Michael says, wow, that vintage hat is amazing. Thank you very much. I think it's amazing too. It was such a bargain. It was only a tenner on eBay and I didn't even have to bid for it. I think someone was clearing out their attic and this was there, and I'm so lucky to have got this hat. And I love it so much, which is why I will be cloning it at some point with this. Let me switch camera views and we'll talk a bit about what this wire shape is and how it links to this bandeau shape. Here we go. So, to get to this shape, you kind of have to take off the Fos Shape and kind of x-ray it. And if I was to put this in an x-ray machine, which I wouldn't recommend because it does have metal in it, it would end up looking a little bit like this. Now, this is half finished. It doesn't have the crosswise wires going across it. So this has only got wires going around one way, this way, kind of on my head you can kind of see it's the front view, but it doesn't have the profile view reinforcement that would go this way. And you need that profile reinforcement because you can see as I'm moving it around, all of these things are moving and going out of place, and it's really not very sturdy at all. Whereas this finished block, look at that, it's quite sturdy. I mean, it's not sturdy this way because that's just this kind of bandeau shape. It's never going to be sturdy between these two endpoints, but it is very sturdy this way. It's like an egg. You know how if you take an egg and you can hold it in the palm of your hand, and try this if you want to, but maybe later when you have access to a sink and running water to clean the mess up. If you put an egg in your hand, I think it's lengthways, and you try and squeeze it, you're not going to be able to do it. But then if you try and squish it from like the two shorter sides, like that, it will squish and go everywhere. This is kind of the opposite, where lengthwise, it's not very sturdy, but crosswise, look, I really can't push that in at all. And the reason for that is the crosswise wires, which I haven't had time to do here. And in fact, I wonder if I hold something white behind this, hopefully you'll be able to see. Whoops. I've got some pen marks. Can you see these little dots? So there's a pink dot here and a black dot and another black dot and a pink dot. Hopefully you can see all those. That's where my crosswise wires will go. And they'll be kind of zigzagging across. Maybe I should make a video on this. This is very difficult to just kind of explain without having anything around. Yeah, maybe this will have to be a video, but they'll kind of cross it and there'll be wire joins everywhere like this one, like a standard millinery wire join. And that will give it enough reinforcement to make a block out of it. So, okay, step 1, plan the wireframe. Step 2, make the wireframe, making sure that it's got your lengthwise sections and your crosswise wires. What do you do after that? Well, you cover it in Buckram. And the way you cover it in Buckram, because normally you take your Buckram, you'd pull it over a block. Well, I say normally, the way I would normally do Buckram is I'd get my Buckram, pull it over a block, maybe make something like this, which is my standard pillbox shape. This is made out of Buckram, and this is pulled over a hat block. But I wouldn't do that with the wireframe because it would just all collapse. So this Buckram is cut on the bias. And if you don't know what the bias is, it's super easy. Don't let it freak you out. When you've got the fabric, you've got a warp and a weft, and the weft runs left. So the warp goes up and down. If you imagine a textile mill where they're weaving the fabrics, the warp will run up and down and the weft runs side to side in the machine. And that's where you get this kind of weave. So if I position this like this, this is on the diagonal. This is the straight grain, which goes up and down like this. Hopefully you can see that there on the camera. You can see the little crosses. And this is cut on the bias. It's the 45-degree angle. So instead of straight, you just go like that. And it's got to be on the exact 45-degree angle. If you're off even a little bit, it will start to warp when you start using it. Now, once you've cut your Buckram, a wide strip of Buckram on the bias, you can then chop it up into little tinier bits. So if I kind of put a fold in where I would make them about this big. What's that? That's about 3 centimeters, maybe 1.5 inches for the American viewers across the pond who don't do metric. I don't do imperial, so I'm sorry if I've got that wrong. But in metric, I would say that's about 3 to 4 centimeters. And then I would use those strips just to stitch them down, just using little tacking stitches to the wire and kind of making like a plated armor out of them. And what you'll notice is because it's on the diagonal, on the bias, it will conform to those curves and you'll get a lovely curved shape on top of your wired frame. Now, the traditional way of, this is a very traditional way of making blocks. If we ignore the existence of Fos Shape for the moment, this is how a lot of milliners would have made their blocks in the past, pre-Fos Shape, and even now, just because Fos Shape can be a bit tricky and there's places that, there's countries where you can't buy Fos Shape, and we'll move on to Fos Shape and its pros and cons in a second, because I have quite strong opinions about Fos Shape, so I'll voice those in a second. But once you've got your kind of armadillo looking plated, armor plated, buckram plated hat shape, you would then cover it in some kind of stiffener. Now in the past, instead of using buckram, you would have used a material called spartree, sometimes called espartree, esparto grass. That's a wonder material that is a video all in itself. Long story short, you cannot buy it anymore. It is not produced, it is not grown, there is no factory that makes it, so we'll make do with buckram. But when you had the spartree, what you would do is you would then paint it with a stiffener called spartalac, which I'm not sure what it is, but if you're interested in finding out more about spartery and spartalac and all those kind of things, Rachel from Labricaloose, a wonderful member of our YouTube Millinery Community, I'll leave a link maybe to her video in the playlist that I'll put together, and you can find her details in the description box below. She's done a lot of work with the spartery and she knows what she's talking about, so she's the person to go and ask about that if you're interested. Yes, I'm getting off track. Let's get back on track. Right, Buckram. Yes, you've done your armadillo shape, you've done the Buckram, you've done some stiffener. But if you then try and block over that Buckram and maybe you haven't stiffened it enough, or it's still a bit wibbly wobbly, you'll notice that it will start to lose its shape, because Buckram, of course, you add steam, you add water, it's going to go completely floppy and it's just going to turn to mush. And that is exactly where the Fos Shape comes in, and you get something like this. Now, what Fos Shape is Fos Shape is called a thermoplastic material. What that means is it's got plastic in it, which solidifies when you add heat, which is why it's great for blocks. There's also something called EVA foam, which I wouldn't recommend using for blocks, because EVA foam, I think, can it continues to be moldable when it's reheated, which is useless for a block. It's essentially like Buckram. If you heat it, add moisture, anything like that, it will go back to its original form and you'll have to reshape it. No good for a block. You want something solid, you want something that's not going to change its shape. This is the wonder property of Fos Shape. This is why a lot of people in the modern millinery world will use Fos Shape for these kind of purposes. Some people also use it to make actual hat bases out of. So if you didn't want to use Buckram to make a pillbox shape like this, you could use Fos Shape. Now, personally, I don't think that's a very good idea unless you're absolutely desperate, because Fos Shape is plastic. And we all know that plastic is not great for the environment. Polyester, which is also plastic, gives off little tiny particles of plastic every time you wash it. I mean, you're not going to be washing this, but I wouldn't be surprised if particles of plastic fall off it every now and again as well. And I just don't think the environment is not worth a hat, you know? So I've made this one block. I have a whole thing of Fos Shape. I will use it up, but I'm not going to purchase it again. I can see that it has its uses. It's not my favorite material. It's not very easy to get hold of. I personally didn't find it very easy to work with. I find it very temperamental, just the way it shrinks. I find it a bit unpredictable, but maybe that's only because I've used it once. I don't know, it's just not for me, and I think it's okay to have a material that's just, that you don't get on with, you know, the material that's not really for you, but I can concede that it has its uses, which is making little curved blocks like this. I think in the future, if I was going to make something like this again, which I will be doing, I'll be doing this hat that I'm wearing, hopefully, on this block at some point in the future. I'm going to try using the Buckram method and not covering it in Fos Shape. I'm going to try a different material, maybe, what would I try? I was thinking about trying just chemical millinery stiffeners, but again, I think they might soften with repeated blocking. I don't know, I haven't tried it yet, but it's on my to-do list. The other thing I was thinking of trying is like plaster paste, so like mix up plaster with water, make it quite watery, and then use it as a paint. I was thinking that could work. Oh, Triana says, what do you think about using paper mache with waterproof glue? Yes, I think that would probably work as well. In fact, actually, yes, you've jogged my memory. I was speaking to, whoops, sorry, I've got a box under the table that I keep kicking. I was speaking to another milliner a few weeks ago, and she said that when she makes a brim block, she doesn't do the cardboard method, but she'll do it in Buckram, and then she'll reinforce the Buckram on, you don't want to reinforce it on top because that's going to add kind of height to your hat and change the shape, but you want to reinforce it from the bottom She uses paper mache, and when you say waterproof glue, you can use wood glue, standard PVA glue, like you would for, what's it called? Decoupage. That's the kind of thing you'd use because PVA glue is actually waterproof, I think. So you can do that. Just build up the layers. Make sure every layer dries in between applications. Otherwise, as it dries, it will shrink and shrivel up. You want to make sure that absolutely every layer is rock solid and dry before you apply the next one. And I think that should work. Hopefully. Something to experiment with. If you do try Trainer, let us know in the comments later on how it goes. I'd be very interested to see how you get on with that. Does anyone have any questions about Fos Shape? Oh, Trainer says, yes, I was thinking about Mod Podge. Made paper waterproof just using it alone. So I think Mod Podge, we don't really have that in Britain. I don't know. Husband, maybe you can tell me in the chat if we've got that in Britain. I don't actually know what it is. Oh, actually, before we move on, and just to give you guys some time to maybe ask me some questions in the chat, before we move on, let's talk about the wire that I've used in the wire shape of this hat. Oh, Matthew's looking now at what Mod Podge is. Oh, in case you hadn't guessed, Matthew is my husband. Yes, Matthew and husband are the same person. Trainer says it's decoupage glue of many varieties. Oh, well then it's probably similar to PVA and wood glue. It's probably that same chemical makeup. That would be polyvinyl acetate. That's the one. Oh, Hobbycraft have it. Oh, well, maybe I'll try some if Hobbycraft have it. If Hobbycraft have it, it must be good. Or rather, it must be tried and tested and people must be buying it. I don't know. I don't usually go to Hobbycraft. Hobbycraft is like a giant craft shop. Like a giant warehouse with aisles and aisles of stuff for craft. What was I talking about? Oh, the wire. So this is millinery wire. This is a fresh new roll that has come because I'd run out. This particular one, I think, is 1 millimeter thick. It might be 1.2. 1.2, I think, is the thicker variety, and then 1 millimeter is the thinner variety. Ideally, for making frames, you'd want to use the thicker variety. Because you want that extra structure, whereas maybe... So when you wire a hat, you want to go as light as possible for keeping the shape. So like in a giant brim, which we'll get onto later. In a giant brim, you want to use the thinnest wire possible to keep its shape, to keep the hat light. In a block, you want the opposite. You want it to be heavy and immobile, immovable. It's not going to budge. So you do want to use a thicker wire, but I use what I have, and I think it's this one. I can't remember which one it is. But that's a galvanized... sometimes it's copper, which is quite soft. Sometimes it's steel. It depends on where you buy from. And it's covered in thread, which is why it looks white. Trainer says, what's your favorite millinery wire alternative? I will get onto that. Don't worry, I will get there. So the good thing about millinery wire is that because it's covered in the threads, it makes it super easy to bend into curves and pretty shapes. And if you do get a kink in it, it's super easy to unkink it with some pliers, or maybe even like with your hands. You can sometimes just warm the wire up in your hands, but just carefully without getting blisters. Warm it up a little bit and just unbend it. It's super malleable, super bendable, unbendable. Like you can see I have a little kink in it over here. I can just do that and it straightens it out straight away. That's the plus of millinery wire. If you can't get hold of millinery wire, don't worry, there are alternatives. I would say you want to use something called galvanized wire, which is wire that tends to be used in gardens and kind of just outdoor purposes. There are some cons to that. I'll get onto those in the middle, but the most important thing is that it is galvanized, which means that it won't rust. So the problem with copper wire is that over time it will oxidize. It will give off green powder, green oxidization. If you live in quite an old city, sometimes we've got roofs of churches or like big dome buildings covered in copper because it's also very malleable. And if you think about like when they were first built, they would have been a lovely bronze, orangey copper color, but now they all look green because they've oxidized, they've gone green and all of that. And the reason you don't want to use that in a hat is because depending on how long you want your hat to last, if you want your hat to last 100 years, don't use copper wire, because if it gets slightly damp or it starts to oxidize, that oxidization may stain whatever fabric or material you've put over it. So you don't want to do that. So don't use copper. But the galvanized wire is technically, it should be rust proof. I have seen galvanized wire rust, but I think that must be very bad quality galvanized wire. So you want really good quality galvanized wire. It comes in a variety of thicknesses, so many more thicknesses than millinery wire does. And it's really good for these kind of purposes. But the problem with galvanized wire is that it's not very easy to bend and unbend. So if you get a kink in it, so as in like if you literally took a piece of galvanized wire and did that, you're never getting rid of that little bump. You might be able to straighten it back out and it will kind of look okay, but you'll always have that little bump in it. Traina says, I love floral wire, it's just so good. Is that the kind of wire that's covered in like the florist tape, like the waxy tape or paper, or it's covered in something that's papery? That's also good. So that paper is what's going to protect it from rusting and things like that. So that's also a great substitute. I think floral wire can be expensive, or like just as expensive as millinery wire. So if you've got the choice between millinery wire or floral wire, I would always choose millinery wire, unless you want the thinner widths, in which case floristry wire is good because it comes in lots of different widths. And I think you can also get it already pre-dyed green, so if you're making little flowers and things like that, that's perfect for that, because it's made for real flowers, but you'll be using it for fake flowers, so it's perfect. But I have always substituted millinery wire for galvanized wire, but only in situations like I think this might be galvanized wire. I can't tell because I've covered it in something, but I think in this pillbox I've got galvanized wire, and that's okay to use in this pillbox because it's literally just an oval that's really easy to bend the wire into shape, and it doesn't kink as you try and bend it. But if I wanted to do a shape, if I wanted to wire this in galvanized wire, I'm going to run into some problems because it's got what I would call a complex curve. The complex curve being is that it curves this way, then it curves this way at the ear, and then it curves back the other way. And to get those curves spot on with galvanized wire, you have to be like an exceptional wire worker. Maybe you've got a jewelry making background. If you've got those skills, go ahead, use the galvanized wire. But if you don't really know what you're doing and you're trying to do a hat, well, when I say you don't know what you're doing, like, I mean, let's face it, I don't really know what I'm doing half the time. When I've tried to use galvanized wire in shapes like this, it's just always gone wrong, because if you bend it in the wrong place and you think to yourself, oh, I've just bent it in the wrong place, I need 1 or 2 extra millimeters, maybe 5 millimeters, maybe even a centimeter difference of where it bends. I'm never getting that kink out, and that's a wasted bit of wire, and it's not going to be good enough to put in a hat. But shapes like this, shapes like this, galvanized wire is perfect for it. Save your millinery wire for special projects where you need those curves correct. Let's read the chat for a little bit. So Fos says, yes, but the floral wire is soft. Well, those I get in my area. I'm guessing it might then be copper wire. I think it's always going to be to do with the metal that's used and it's also going to be to do with the thickness, and then also whatever it's covered in. I haven't experimented with all these different types of wires, so I'm probably not the right person to give you guys advice on that. I can only give you advice on what I've tried, and that is literally just millinery wire and galvanized wire. And I suggest that you get your hands on whatever's available to you and give it a go. You might find that the way that you make your hats, or the type of hats you make, really suit using soft floristry wire, or you might find that you have only galvanized wire available and you want to make simple shapes that are just one circle or one curve, and that suits you fine as well. It's, as I say, it's whatever works for you. Oh, I should talk a little bit about what shapes are suited to this kind of wireframe, maybe versus the cardboard brim that I was talking about earlier. So you'll notice the cardboard brim. Let me get the cardboard brim back out. The cardboard brim, it's totally flat. It's just a flat angle. It's got no curves. So this didn't need to be like curved out like this, like a mushroom brim. So cardboard, perfect. Straight lines, just a slice of pie. Putting into this, that's going to be great. But something curved like this, something small with many curves, it's going to want to be a wireframe with the Buckram and reinforcement and Mod Podge or PVA, paper mache, decoupage, whatever you want. But it's got to be this. So another shape that's suited to the Fos Shape method is a little button hat like this. I made this on a proper button block. This is very old. This is one of the first hats I ever made, which I've retrimmed and retrimmed, so it's all dented. It's not got the best ribbon in it. It's all over the place, but I keep it because it's the first one I made and I'm rather attached to it. I never even wear it. It's not really my style of hat. Let me pop it on my head. I don't know, I just don't think it suits me very much. Oops. Watch the hair get messy. There we go. Okay, that's the button. I just don't think it suits me. It's kind of too small for my head. Maybe if I had big fuzzy hair, this would be really good, but never mind. I'll keep it on for this section. So this kind of small button hat is great for wires and things like that. In fact, if you want to practice making a wireframe hat, something like a button shape or one of these is super easy to make. In fact, if you search on the internet, you might be able to find it. There's some stuff in vintage books about how to make these kind of wireframe hats. Maybe if I'd prepared a bit more. Let me see. What have I got here in my bookshelf? I'm pretty certain this book has some stuff about wire making. Let me just quickly have a look. Yes, it does. Okay, let me just do this. Hopefully this will be in focus. So, this is called Edwardian Hats, The Art of Millinery from 1909 by Madame Anna Ben Youssef, who was a very famous, I think, New York milliner in the 1920s, I think. Oh, well, 1909, so kind of Edwardian hats, and I think she was making hats all the way up until the 20s, but I'm not sure. So this is, she talks about how to measure the wires, how to cut the wires, how to make a wireframe. Here she is just making like a boater hat, making a hat that has, so this is an actual wireframe hat. This was very popular in the Edwardian times, where they'd have this big giant wire frame that was covered in layers and layers of fabric and tulle and bows, sometimes whole birds. In fact, if you'd like to know more about these kind of, you know, Edwardian hats with big birds on them, I do have a history video, which is about 7 minutes long, which I'll link to after the stream in the playlist. I think it's called From Royalty to Showgirls, Feathers in Headwear, or something like that. I'll link to it. Anyway, I thought it was rather interesting about birds in millinery and how they were used and now how they're not used, thank goodness. So anyway, I found that interesting. But this is the kind of hat that would accommodate these massive wings and bows and things. Trainer says, where can I get this book? I would love to make one for someone dear to me. So I will leave a link to the... I won't leave a link, sorry. I'll leave the information of this book in the description box. I'll give you the ISBN number and the title. This is actually a reprint from the 90s for a library. See, it says for reference only, which in the UK means that you couldn't take this out of the library. It was such a special book, but you couldn't even check it out of the library. So this one is like second, third, fourth, fifth hand. This was the only copy I could find in the UK. I think it's easier to find these in America. You might even be able to find a free copy of it online on a website called archive.org. I will, that's got loads of books that are out of print that are free to view because they're in the public domain on it. That's usually one of the first things I check. But I really wanted a printed version just because it's easier for me when I'm working. I prefer to read things off a book rather than on the screen. But I'll leave the information to it and just have a look around. I ordered this through a secondhand bookshop on the internet in the UK. But have a look around on the internet. I'll send the information. So what else does she go through? She's got domed crowns. She's got a turban brim for large separate crowns. Child's bonnet, where the wireframe goes upwards. Bonnet frame, which I guess you could call this hat almost like a bonnet in this sense. You can see this is the kind of structure that it's got. And child's close bonnet, that's definitely kind of... You can see the crisscross here that I was talking about, where it's going over this way, and then you've got wires going crosswise and lengthwise over the top. She's got covering the frames here. So this isn't quite making hat blocks, but it's going to tell you a lot about the actual frame making, which is a very interesting topic. But in general, there's a lot of stuff in this book that I have recently found incredibly useful. So that's this one. Let me just check a second book that I think has information on making wire structures. It's also an American one. It's called Millinery for Every Woman. It's practically the same. So I think pick one to buy and you don't need both. Ah, there we go. Look, wireframes. So here she's talking about transparent hats, which is that Edwardian type. But here you've actually got photos in this book. You can see here the wireframe with the crosswise and the lengthwise. So this is a type of way to do a wire join. This is how wire joins are made in the jewelry industry. I've actually done them differently. This is very difficult to change if you go wrong. So I've actually sewn the joins here with a millinery wire join, which again, I'll link to a video on how to do a wire join in a playlist after the stream goes live. But this is just another way to do it, maybe if you prefer, because this is super time consuming to do all these joins because you have to do them everywhere. But this is much quicker. Oh, and there's a table of what types of wire exist, or at least existed. Let's have a look. What date is this book from? There's the published information. 1926, so later on than the Anna Ben Youssef. And this is by Georgina Kerr Kay. But I have found that they are generally the same. Oh, look here. A brim made on a buckram or willow square. So I don't know if she's making... What's this chapter? Making of solid frames. Oh, this is what I was talking about with the cardboard, where you cut out a pizza slice and you pop it together. So as you can see, you can do... I could have made this one. I could have made this cardboard one out of Buckram, but I didn't want to waste Buckram and I had the cardboard lying around, so it's cheaper, I think. But I could have done it out of Buckram and reinforced it. So, yeah, nothing really about actual block making. That's a shame. One could almost say that I should have prepped a bit better. One last thing I'd like to mention about the Fos Shape, and this is a question that I get asked a lot every time I mention Fos Shape shapes, is can you pin through them? Because obviously with the cardboard, oh, you can see a little pinhole there. I've pinned through it just with normal hat blocking pins. With some other homemade blocks, you can't pin through. Some people find it difficult to pin through wood, but Fos Shape, yes, you can pin through. Let me just show you. I shall sacrifice a pin, and you'll see why I'm saying, you'll see what I mean by sacrifice. Because, yes, you can pin through them, but sometimes they end up being a bit gummied up with something, I don't know what. Okay, so I should really wear a thimble as well. Let's have a look. I've got a thimble to hand. There you go, metal thimble. Pushing that through. So I've pushed that through. And you can see there's already something that's ended up being there. I don't know what that is. It's just, I don't know why it's just sticky. Maybe it's the way I've made this block. Maybe it shouldn't be sticky, but it just is. And now I'm not going to be able to use this pin for anything else. Oh. Yeah. Or maybe I put, oh, do you know what? I know what I've done in this block. I have vague memories of covering it in gaffer tape, and that's probably what's gumming up my pin. So, no, plain Fos Shape should be fine without gumming up pins. Don't cover your blocks in gaffer tape. This is something that I used to just experiment with, because gaffer tape was the only thing I could think of that would be waterproof. So I thought I'd try covering the Buckram in gaffer tape to see if that would waterproof it. And yes, it does, but then when you pin through it, you get all the glue from the gaffer tape stuck on your pins, and then you can't reuse the pins. But if I stick this through just a layer of Fos Shape, stiff Fos Shape, I'll just bend a bit back. Yeah, no, that would be fine. So if you want to pin through Fos Shape, you can. Just don't have any gluey things in it, underneath it. How are we all doing? Still interested? Am I rabbiting on too much? So, in conclusion about the Fos Shape, you can use Fos Shape. You're going to have to cover it in Buckram first anyway, so... Traina says, use lighter fluid to clean the weird gummy stuff. Ooh! Oh, I guess a lighter fluid sounds a bit dangerous, but maybe isopropyl alcohol. That would probably work as well. Yes, I shall keep that in mind. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any more questions about the wireframes and Fos Shapes, Buckrams, all those things? Michael says, very interesting, just absorbing it all. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're finding this interesting. I hope you also find it useful, and I hope you try something. Do you know, just a bit of a confidence talk. Let me take a sip of water. It has taken me about 4 years to really understand that millinery in itself, it's not just about the finished pretty hat and, oh, I've made a hat shape or I've bought a hat shape and I'm just going to wear it or I'm just going to trim it and it will look pretty. I think I've recently been discovering millinery from a different angle, which is it's all about augmenting the shape of your head. So when you put something on your head, you change the shape of the whole head, and whether that's with the trim or without a trim, with a bow, without a bow, or, you know, like just a hat like this where it's the shape and the trim working together to give this bumpy look, or whether it's literally just the button shape as is and it gives, you know, like a different look. It's taken me a while to understand that. And what's made me really start to love millinery even more is playing around with the 3D shapes. I used to just go in with all the trims. I I love trims, I love flowers, feathers, vintage berries. I really have a soft spot for vintage berries. Not a big fan of bows, but maybe we'll get onto that. But recently I've really found that what really makes me happy creatively is thinking about, this is the shape I want to make, and how do I make this shape? Not so much the trim, but actually the hat base itself. And block making, your own block making, that's where that's the skill that's helping me accommodate all these ideas that I now have in my head. I still have time, and I make time for coming up with trims or looking at berries, learning how to do bows, because I learned that this week. My name is Ilona, I am 26 years old, and I learned how to tie a bow this week for the first time. So I'm still learning all those trimming side of things, but it's the shapes that are really catching my attention now, and I'm really ready to try new and fantastic shapes this year with blocks that I can't maybe buy, but I can make myself. I'm finding it like an interesting puzzle. So, and when I first started, I didn't really want anything to do with DIY blocks or making blocks because I thought it's really difficult. And actually I'm finding my own ways to do it, and I'm discovering ways that are easy to me and that I find interesting enough to hold my attention for longer than 5 minutes. So something that I really don't get on with is block making where you have, you can buy foam. I don't know what type of foam it is, but it's some kind of foam that you buy and you sand it down, you cut it down, and you make a shape out of it. I would call that like a reductive method of block making, which is, I think, how they would make a wooden hat block. My visual eye just doesn't quite work like that, and I actually like to build a shape from nothing to something rather than start with something and take it in and take it down and make a 3D shape that way. The learning journey is so inspiring. Oh, thank you very much. Well, I hope I inspire you to try something new. I think I'd love for everyone to just feel confident enough to just try something that maybe they're not too confident in, because you never know what might grab your attention. Just like I didn't think that making wireframed hats would grab my attention, and it actually really has, strangely. Right, shall we move on? I've got 2 more types of block to show you guys. So let me just clear away all the things. So I'll get rid of the wireframes, get rid of the wires, get rid of this hat, the vintage one, get rid of the bandeau. Right, get rid of the cardboard. And we'll move on to, so this is one of the first blocks I ever made. So be kind. This is a plaster hat block. You could say this is the one that started it all for me. Let me switch camera views. Here we go. So, how did I make this? Well, I do have a video on how I made it, or not this specific one, because this was one of the first ones I made, but I made a domed crown for like a Jackie O style, for well, not just style, but for Jackie Kennedy's inauguration hat. I made a video on that, on how to make a wireframe, sorry, not a wireframe, on how to make a plaster pillbox, plaster crown shape. Let me share my screen and we can just go over a few things that I'm doing in that video, just to get an idea of how we get to this stage of the plaster block. So this is the plaster block video. I'm not going to be able to see the chat while I show you this video, so I will answer all your questions once I go through what I have to say about this video. So this is a program called Blender, which is 3D modeling software. Bear with me, it will make sense. This is a great way to visualize a 3D shape if you're not too confident in wasting materials of like paper and wire, which I wasn't at the time. I'm a little more confident now, but I think this is a really good beginner method if you're struggling to visualize 3D. So I'm very much a 2D person. I come from a graphic design background, so graphic design is all about looking at something 3D and making it 2D, whereas hats are kind of everything should be 3D, and I really struggled with that when I started, and this was the only way I could think of in trying to see something that was 3D in real life. So what I did was I recruited my husband to help me because he actually knows how to use 3D modeling software, although I then figured out how to use Blender as well, and I can actually use it well enough now. But what I did is I asked my husband to make that 3D shape for me in Blender, and then you can export it as a paper net. And a paper net is just, you know, in school you get those when you're trying to build a cube, they give you a printout of something with lots of squares and you put it together, glue the tabs together, and you get a shape of a cube. That starts out as a flat net. Let me pause the video right there. That's then that paper net put together into various different hat shapes. So this is just me trying it at different sizes. This is the other thing that making paper nets for hats is really good for. If you're not quite sure which proportion you want to go with, what size you want to make something, if you make something in a 3D modeling software and print off the net, you can scale it up and down and play with the proportions much easier than if you'd made something with wire and then have to fiddle with it afterwards and you're wasting materials or whatever. But here, you're just wasting paper, which, I mean, wasting paper doesn't sound like a particularly good thing, but at least it's recyclable. And at least I'm not wasting wire. So that's what's going on here. So once I'd figured out what shape I wanted, let's skip forward a bit. This is me now putting together the wireframe. So we've already spoken about this. This was in those books that I mentioned. What were the books? The Edwardian hats and the Art of Millinery books. This is doing the wire. And this is how you'd get the measurements for making a wireframe. I just measured up and down the pattern, took down all the measurements, then I cut my wires to length. This is me using galvanized wire. This is kind of where I learned that galvanized wire isn't such a good idea. And millinery wire is a lot easier, even though galvanized wire is, I mean, so much cheaper. Joining it with a ferrule there. Anyway, you can go and see most of this video about the wireframe. This is already putting it together. And then this is me covering it in gaffer tape because I didn't want to do this with Buckram. And because this wasn't going to be this top dome here, where my mouse is, that's not going to be pinnable anyway, so it didn't matter that it's got gaffer tape on the inside and outside. Because obviously you can't pin into plaster anyway, and we'll get onto that in a bit. But I'm covering it in gaffer tape because it's easier than sewing lots of Buckram together. It's already waterproof, it will hold the shape of the plaster. So essentially what I'm making here is a mould that I can then pour plaster into to make the shape. So here I am mixing the plaster. Here it is. I do really enjoy working with plaster. I find it very therapeutic. I love how it feels when it's finished, even though I've then gone and coated the plaster block with paint and things, and we'll get onto that. But I just think plaster is just so wonderful. Especially if you get it right. You can get it wrong, but if you follow all the instructions and obviously follow all the safety advice, it'll go right and it will work well. And what I have learnt with the plaster is you want to build it up in layers. So you can see I've done a little bit, I've let it dry, mixing another bit, pouring it in, letting it dry. Because if you pour it all in one go, it will never dry out. It will just stay wet. And it will start going moldy because obviously you've covered the wireframe in gaffer tape. which is not breathable. So the air is not circulating inside your mold. It's not going to allow it to dry. So you want to let it to kind of dry between every pour. And it gets messier and messier as you go along, as you can see by this pile of plaster graveyard material. Anyway, once it's dry, I then destroyed the mold to take it out, and there it is. And then it's onto the sanding, and this is really important because you do want the surface to be nice and smooth, because all those ridges, you think they won't show up, but then they do. I have been I've been stung with that before. So this is me wet sanding. So wet sanding just means wetting, in fact, not even sanding paper. This is the green side of a sponge, like the scouring side of a sponge, for tough food debris on cookware. Just wetting the sponge and smoothing it down, because the plaster was still slightly wet, so it can be sanded that way. And then once it's fully dry, just some wet sanding, so wetting the sandpaper a bit over a sanding block and smoothing everything down. What would I do next? And then this is me painting it. Now, I think there's a bit that I missed out. Oh no, here it is. So, once you've sanded it, you might still end up with a few dents. And the way to get rid of them is to just smooth over some wood filler, wall filler, poly filler, whatever it's called where you are. Just the stuff that you'd put on your walls if you took a picture down and you no longer wanted a hole in your wall. The stuff you'd use there. That's what I'm using here with an old card to get it into the gaps and cover all those joins. And then I'm painting it with wall paint, so emulsion wall paint, so the paint that I paint here, just because I happen to have a lot of tester pots lying around, because we painted our flat various different colours in different rooms, and I had so many tester pots, and I thought, why let them go to waste when I can use them on my hat blocks? And this particular Jackie Kennedy one, I painted in a nice light purple colour, a light pink even, that's a light pink even though it looks purple. This pillbox over here, that's in a nice purple colour, which was a contender for the living room, but then we went for orange. That's a story for another day. So, here's the interesting bit. You can't pin into plaster. Or, I mean, maybe you can, but I don't know, my fingers would not be able to take it. So what I've used here is a, like a bathroom seal, or a window seal, or if you go into the video, I talk about what this stuff is. But it's sticky on the back, and it's, let's go back to there. It's sticky on the back, so it sticks to the plaster. I've put in 2 rows of it there, and I'll show you a close-up of the pillbox that I'm holding in my hands right now in a second. But it's rubber, and you can pin into it. Other options are cord, like a thick rope. You can pin into that. I couldn't think of a way of attaching it to the plaster. Other than using a silicone bath sealer as a glue. I don't know if you've ever had to seal a join between a bath and the wall before, but I have, and it's super whiffy, smelly, sticky stuff that if you get on something, it will not come off. So that stuff is great for sticking anything that you want to pin into to the inside of plaster blocks and other blocks as well, which you make from other materials. So that stuff's great. But obviously follow the safety guidelines, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, all the standard safety procedures for any kind of building usage. And the last step is to cover everything in a glossy top coat. So I'm using a clear varnish. You can use yacht varnish, as long as it is glossy, so you don't want to use the matte type, because the glossy will give it a hard coating, it will protect it from water damage, and you definitely also want to cover in that inside lip that I was talking about there. Right, so if you want to see that video, I'll leave a link to it. No one's got any questions for me on the plaster blocks. I guess there's not very many questions to have. Let me show you the inside of the plaster block, the pillbox that I've been talking about all this time. Let's go this camera view. Here is the inside. So this is this sealer, window seal, plastic, rubber seal, whatever it is that you can pin into. Let me just show you that you can indeed pin into it. These aren't blocking pins, these are dressmaking pins. I don't know where my blocking pins are. So there we go. That pins in nice and easily, and that's why I like it. I actually think it's easier to pin into this stuff than it is into rope. And I find it holds okay. The only difference is when you block on a block like this, because you can't quite, there's not a lot of surface to pin through there, so this distance isn't a lot. So I tend to actually pin through it like that, and that holds everything in place better. So you can pin inwards or you can pin outwards like this, but this holds fabrics in place better this way round. In fact, in my autumnal UFOs video, where I think I unblock this hat off the block, you can have a look at that to see the pin pattern on the inside, and this hat was made on this block. If I pop this on my head, you'll see how it sits. It's just a standard pillbox again. These ridges, we'll talk about them in a second in case you're interested in that, but this is just a simple plaster pillbox made using a mold that I poured plaster in, and then I put these rubber things in to pin into. Has anyone got any questions? Oh, and if you're watching on catch up, on demand, if you like, pop your questions in the comments down below, and hopefully I'll be able to get back to you on anything you want to ask, as long as it's on the topic of the video. Shall I talk a little bit about this pillbox? Because you'll notice that it's got these two ridges in it, whereas this plaster hat block doesn't. So this is a blocking technique called veining, where you block something on a block. You can do this on a standard crown block as well. And then you pinch the felt together, or whatever material you're blocking. When you pinch it together, you find a way to fix it in place. In the case of this hat, I used a needle and thread to hold it in place. Sometimes you can use pins, sometimes you can use clothes pegs, whatever works for you. And then once it's dry, you take everything out and you get these lovely one-of-a-kind shapes. Julia says, can you use any fabric on the plaster hat block? Yes, you can. The way you would do so, this is felt that I've blocked on the plaster hat block. This is Buckram that I've blocked on the plaster hat block. And then this is also Buckram that I blocked on the plaster hat block, and then I've covered it in silk dupion fabric. This is a hat from my video about the bias, which I will be linking to in the playlist. So if you'd like to see how to make this hat, that'll be there. But this is blocked on this. I haven't put it on straight, have I? Never mind. I can't really see what I'm doing. This way? Never mind. There is a hat on my head. Is it straight? I don't know. This is made on this one, as is this one. So this is the same. But if you notice, if I put this one next to me, it's shorter. And that's because on a pillbox block, in fact on any block, you are in charge, not the block. You can change the shape of the hat from your block in whatever way you wish. You can make it shorter. You can't really make it taller unless you have an extension or you add something to it, but you can add something to it. You can add shapes on top of the block, stick things to it with masking tape, change the shape. So make the block work for you. Don't just use the block as is, because that is how the block is made. Just, if you think of something, there's definitely a way to execute it. So hopefully that answers your question, Julia. Different materials. What have I not blocked on it? I've not tried straw yet, but I do intend to try straw on this block. I have a lovely hat in mind for some decorated straw, some fancy exotic weave straw that I want to dye light pink and block on the pillbox because I think it will look really lovely. But again, that's on my list. That's on my forever list of things to do in the future that I haven't got around to yet. It keeps growing. that's the pillbox. And then I think we come to one of the most exciting hat blocks that I've ever made. Which is down here. In fact, I've made two of these because I love this method so much. There is this one. And, oh, there's this giant massive one. Now, can anyone guess what material this is? If you're a builder, you can guess what material this is. I don't know how many builders we have in the chat, but just tidy up a few things on the desk while you guys think about what on earth this could possibly be. In fact, let me get the hats out that I made on these blocks as well. We'll start with this one. This is a little mushroom brim hat. Michael says, some sort of insulation foam. Exactly. That is exactly what this hat block is made out of. I'll start with the shape that's currently on my head, which I quite like. I think it's really cute. It's this little shape here. So as you can see, what I was talking about earlier about making the blocks work for you, this is actually cut shorter than the block, just to a flattering length for my face. So if I was making this hat for a different person with a different shaped face, maybe with a different shaped head, I might cut it lower or shorter depending on where the eye line is. So that's, again, we were talking about thinking about the hair and accommodating the hair. You also want to accommodate someone's eye line when you're making a hat for someone specific. So this is PU foam, so polyurethane foam, 2-part foam, expanding foam that's used in the building industry. I think it's used to seal and insulate windows sometimes. So when you put in a new window, you want to put some foam in to plug all the gaps, and it expands and fills the gaps, and there's some insulation there. And this stuff is really great because you can pin into it. So it's not like the plaster, which is heavy and you can't pin into. This you can pin into. So this is made in pretty much the same way as the plaster block, where you need to have a mold to pour it into. So if we kind of revisit back the shapes that we've done, we had the cardboard shape that we made ourselves from flat patterning. Then we had the wireframe shape that we instructed the kind of curves that our hat would take. We made the shape from scratch. With this hat and the previous plaster hat, we were making a mold, or we had a mold or something, and then we fill it with a substance, and the substance takes on the shape, and then we can block on that later. So why would you choose PU foam over something like the plaster? Well, if you've already got a shape that you want to fill, you probably don't want to use plaster and pour it into a ready-made hat. So the way I made both of these is I actually had a pre-blocked hat shape that I had made on someone else's block in a college. I'd borrowed a block, blocked a shape, took it home, decided, oh, I really like this shape, I want to clone it. And this was the best way I could think of doing that. So if I share my screen again, let me just get that ready. Whoops, there we go. This is the shape I'm talking about. Actually, this one, the one in the video is this giant one, because the first one I made before I was filming for YouTube. So that was something before, and then I just wanted to make this big one. I happen to have this big hat that I'd made before. It doesn't have to be a hat, it can be a bowl, but then if you're doing it from inside a bowl, you could use plaster, but the foam is lighter, and this is how you would do it. Let's go through it. This is me covering and protecting the shape using gaffer tape. Once again, I do really like using gaffer tape to protect molds. Especially with this one. This was a felt hat because I could just unstick the gaffer tape afterwards and use it again. I could remake it into a hat, or I actually ended up taking it apart and using it for felt scraps. Husband, my battery is about to run out on the overhead camera. If you could come and be my tech support while I keep talking about what's going on in this video that we're watching. Hopefully the screen is being shared. While husband is helping me out with the battery, I'll keep annotating over this video.
Batteries are down there.
No, that one.
Oh, this one?
Yeah. Right. Sorry, everybody. Technical issues. So this is just me gaffer taping it, following the curves. So following the curves is really important because you don't want any kinks in the tape, because otherwise it will come out as dents or indents in the foam. So you want to make sure it's nice and smooth. So that's all gone on. I mean, you can watch this video in detail later on, but let's see the foam in action. This is me covering it with cling film. And you'll notice that I'm going to be using... Oh, is the camera focused? Yep. Great. Thank you, husband. You'll notice I'll be using something called 2 parts polyurethane foam rather than the expandable foam that you can buy pre-mixed in a can. And I'll talk about that in a second. This is me protecting the block with cling film, checking the dimensions. You can watch the video. Oh, safety advice. As usual, follow all the safety instructions. This is mixing of the foam. So it's a 2-part foam that you mix in a container that you would then get rid of because obviously the foam is toxic. 1 part goes in, the second part goes in, it goes into the block. Oh yeah, don't do this. So this was me trying to get every little last morsel out of the foam, and as you can see on the bottom of this block, I will show it to you in more detail in a second, but you can see it's all bumpy on the bottom. If you don't want it bumpy on the bottom and you want it nice and smooth, then you can, to get this kind of smooth bottom of the block so it doesn't wobble when it's on the table, you don't want to be getting the extra bits of foam out of the foam container once it's expanded. So as long as you've put some Vaseline on the cling film and whatever, and so you can demold it. Incidentally, you would be doing that with the plaster block as well. I talk about the whole process in more detail in these videos. You can see that's come out with a lot of imperfections in there. Now that cling film isn't always going to come off. That's okay. It doesn't matter. You want the block to be covered in cling film later anyway. This is me cleaning off the Vaseline and then trying to take off as much cling film as I can, but it doesn't matter if a lot doesn't come off. And then cutting off the excess with a craft knife. And once again, please do leave me your comments in the questions and any comments you have in the chat, and I'll answer them once I switch the screens back so I can see the chat. This is my favourite bit of footage I've ever filmed. So satisfying. That's the foam expanding, so hence expanding foam. It will fill the space that you put it in. And you can see that's got a nice level top on it, so because I didn't try and get the last morsels out. That was just me experimenting to see if I can do it in a plastic container, and the answer is yes, you can. Yeah, so that's that expanding foam. Oh, there was a part 2 to this video. A lot of people watch the part 1 and then don't watch the part 2, but I do recommend you watch the part 2 because I go over all these imperfections and how to get rid of them. So you can see over here, this is me using wood filler. I know it's bright orange. It's because the local hardware shop didn't have any white wood filler, but oh well. At the end of the day, what is that? I'm clearly talking about something there. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the hat block looks like, as long as it functions as a hat block, which this most certainly does. Once I got rid of all the imperfections, you can see if I hold it up here, this is all that orange wood filler that I had to use over the top. This smaller one was a lot more successful. I think I didn't have the pressure of the camera on me when I was doing this one, so it's turned out much better. So it's applying it, sanding it. Oh, yeah, sanding it down, measuring it, making sure it's got an even edge all the way around. So I'll show you on the close-up camera where I've put my marks on this block. And then I've marked out a head size oval on the top of it, just to know where the center is and where to aim to put a collar block on it or a crown block. Because sometimes when you block a brim, you want a little lip so that you can have a crown to brim join. Or if you're blocking all in one, you just stick the whole crown block onto it and block around that. And the difference between the plaster and the PU foam is you don't want to paint the PU foam, but you do want to protect it with lots of layers of cling film. The more cling film, the better, because the PU foam is toxic. You don't want it to get out into the environment. I have a little cat running around, so I don't want any of the particles of the foam getting anywhere near her. So I've covered everything in cling film, and I keep it topped up with cling film. So every time I block, I'll just make sure that there's no gaps in it, and I'll put a new layer of cling film over the top. If you've covered the whole thing in wood filler, then you won't necessarily need the cling film, but it is a slightly more difficult to block through, to pin through the wood filler than it is the foam. So let's change the camera view back. Oh, I think my other camera's run out of battery. Give me 1 second to just deal with that. Speak amongst yourselves. There we go, we're back. Right, just double check the focus. There it is. Right. Michael says, yes, I love mushroom type hats. Yes, I love them too. I think it's one of the only brim shapes that I actually really enjoy wearing. I'm not very much a brim hat person. Yes, I'm just looking through the questions now. Julia says, can you show the inside lining of the mushroom hat? It looks glorious. I most certainly can. Here is the lining. In fact, on this camera, you can see it. So this is a bias lining. This is a viscose acetate. So it's quite thin, and it's still drapey. So I wouldn't use this. This is more difficult to use inside a Buckram hat. This is it inside the Buckram hat. Sometimes you can see through it and see the Buckram. So it's a bit difficult to use there. But on felt, this is pretty good because you're just trying to cover up any stitching, or sometimes because this is a white hat, it can... Oh, there we go. Sometimes you have stitching marks, or maybe you have stiffener marks inside a hat and you want to get rid of them, cover them up. Or sometimes you just want to make a hat super fancy. Of course, putting a lining inside the hat will always add to the price. But sometimes you might want something just a little more luxurious. So that's the lining there. What did I say I was going to show you? Oh yes, I was going to show you guys the markings on the hat block. The camera's still got bits all over it, all the text. Never mind. Oh well, doesn't matter. So this is the head size oval. So if I was to find my head size block, which I don't have next to me at the moment, but it doesn't matter. You can see it's the oval. This is the head size. I could in fact draw multiple different head sizes on, but this is currently just one head size. And I've got a front to back line, super important, and I've got my side to side line. In fact, on all of the blocks that I've shown you today, on most of them, I've got these marks in them because they are super important. So if I get the plaster one back out, you can see it's got a cross in the middle and it's got some lines up and down the side with the front and back marked on. As does, obviously, this one, and the cardboard one does as well. The Fos Shape one hasn't got front and back marked, just because I didn't think it was that important in it. It's symmetrical from the front to the back, it didn't need them. But because these are not symmetrical, they need the front and back marks, just to know. It doesn't mean it has to be your front and back. You can rotate it, but essentially you just want to know your lines of symmetry so that you have as many guidelines as possible for when you're putting your hats together, so that you know where all your design lines are. The other thing I've got marked on this block in particular, not so much on the smaller one where this hat is a brim mark. So in a traditional wooden block that might be mushroom, you might get a groove going around it, which is where you'd put your blocking cord. In fact, I can show you a block like that once we're done. If you were here in the last stream, you'll know that I really struggled with a black wool felt cape clean that I wanted to block on a upturned brim block. And I'm pleased to say that I conquered it. So I will show you that once we finish. This is the last hat block I'll be showing you guys. So thanks for staying with me so far. Just a few more bits of information and I promise we'll move on to something else, and I'll show you a few other things I've been working on. Last bit of information. So this is a type of brim mark. This particular one corresponds to this big hat over here. If I pop this on my head, I'm not fully satisfied with this hat. I'm still working on it. But this sits like this. In fact, it's, yeah, at an angle and it's head size. And you can see that even though it's this mushroom shape, this kind of looks like it's flat, but it's just got that slight curve, which you can see is kind of here on this one. Maybe if I hold it up like that, you can see there's this, and it curves down a bit, and it's just shortened mushroom brim. So this is another one of those ways where you can use one block in multiple different ways. In fact, I also had a video about making an upturned brim block where I used this type of brim to create the upward brim, which I'll put that in a playlist as well. In fact, I think I have a playlist of just all of my DIY hat block videos, or like making hats without blocks videos. I'll, just they're there if you want to find them. And I will link to them as well, just to make it easier for you guys. So that's the short brim, but you might be thinking, what does this hat look like, this brim look like, if it's the full curve? Well, I have to dive under my table and bring out this giant hat box. Let me switch camera views. Oh, giant hat box. Let's open it up. It's absolutely giant. I kind of thought to myself, well, if I'm making this kind of big brim, why not make the most giant hat I could possibly think of? I did then go onto a blockmaker's website and I had a look at the types of sizes that they offer for wooden mushroom brims. And this is classed as a medium. So, yeah. I'm also still not too happy with this with this hat. I'm going to work on it a little bit more. I think I'm going to take it apart and remodel it a bit, because I really like the weave of the straw, but I don't really like the square top, and I like it, but it's not for me, and I'm too attached to this hat to sell it, so I'm going to remake it for myself. But this is what a medium mushroom brim looks like. Here it is. And if you go back to the video where I was making the block, you'll see that the brim I was cloning, even though it was upside down on the table, I should have really shown it on my head in that video, but I didn't really know what I was doing when I was filming that one. It was from a while ago. But you'll see that it kind of it is big, but apparently this is classed as medium. Let me just put this hat away, because I did find my kitten playing with the bow on this hat earlier. So this hat forever lives in the box. it is not a cat-safe hat. I've had a question in chat. I will answer that in 1 second. So that's all I can tell you about PU foam blocks, and obviously you can pin into them. Ya says, how do you notice a front and back of your block? It depends on the block. So some blocks it will be obvious where the front and back is. I'm just looking at what I have to hand. Yes, I'll show you a few examples. So this one, which is a perfect circle, if I hold it like this, ignore what's drawn on it, kind of look at just this rounded shape. In fact, you could see it on the hat a bit better. It's a perfect circle, so it does not matter where your front and back is. But once you've drawn in your oval, it will matter where your front and back is, because you'll want to match your brim to your oval in the right way. Even if it's slightly off, like by 1 centimeter, you'll notice, and it will look a bit off. So you do want to do that. On this block over here, again, because I pattern drafted it myself, I knew where the front and back was, because as I was pattern making, I folded the pattern in half, and then obviously I could see where the fold and the end of it was in the semicircle, if you think of it as a semicircle, and then the head size oval will tell me where the front and back is. In this pillbox shape, which I made myself, as I was making the wireframe, I marked my front and back and my side to side as well. So you can see on, can you see there? It's got the blue marks. Let's change camera views. Ooh, sorry about all the noise there. So you can see the front and back marks on this one, these little blue Sharpie marks. The front and back on something like, so this is also symmetrical. We'll get on to non-symmetrical ones in a second. But because this is symmetrical, I have a longer bit and I have a shorter bit, and I just have them marked. But it's something that you can set arbitrarily. I mean, technically, if I wanted to make a hat, well, in fact, let me just pop it on my head. This is the one that was blocked on this block. So you can see this bit here marks my back. So even when you take it off the block, you want to mark those marks onto your hat, because you know, there's no such thing as too much information, really. If you've marked it on, you won't regret it. But if you haven't marked it on, you will regret it. So just always best to mark all the markings onto your hat shape. So I've done that here by putting this join here at the back. So that's the back. If I pop it on the block, you'll see it will match up just about. Obviously I haven't bothered to mark the side to side, but back to what I was saying earlier about make the block work for you. You don't have to listen to the block. The front of your hat is where you want the front to be. The front and back marked on the block is relative to a standard use of a block. But say I wanted to make this pillbox and wear it kind of lengthways, which, I don't know, you might want to do that. Why not? And kind of have an oval that goes across your head rather than this way. So this would be the traditional way, where I've got the back mark directly central to my bun. This is long ways forward, but maybe you want to design a hat that sits more like this. It almost looks kind of a little sailory, like a sailor pillbox going over to the sides like that. You might want to do that, in which case, when you take it off the block, you'd mark all the corresponding marks on, just so you know where your front and back is, if this is how you've decided to use it. It's just good to know these things. On a wireframed one, we're just going back through all the ones earlier. With the wireframe ones, so on this one, even though it's symmetrical, I will be marking my front, my central line. Let's call it the central line, because there is a dead-on center, and because this hat is meant to be worn symmetrically on the head this way round, you want to mark that on, because you want to know where that central point is, because if you wanted to trim it non-symmetrically and maybe put a flower on it, 1/3, 2/3 across, then you want to know where the center is so you can at least put it on your face centrally, or on your poupée head, or on your client, or whoever you're making the hat for yourself, for someone else, doesn't matter. An on that person's head. Have a look at where that trim should go. Incidentally, just a quick tip, I would tend to position an off-centered trim either where the eyebrow arches or at the end of the eyebrow, kind of in that area. That can look pretty nice. G Cardinal says, have you experimented with 3D printing blocks? I have not, but I would love to. I think that's 3D printing is just such an amazing technology, and I think it definitely has a place in the millinery world. I'd also kind of like to experiment with 3D printed hat trims, but I don't have a 3D printer. There is a makerspace in my local area, and one day I will get a membership and go and have a look at the 3D printer, and also 3D scanners. I think actually Rachel from La Bricoluse has worked with students who were 3D scanning things, I think. Rachel's not with us in the chat today, but if you look up her channel, which I'll leave in the description below, I think you can ask her about how that kind of equipment works. In fact, I'll leave all the links to the Millinery YouTube community members that we've got going on. You should go and visit everyone. Everyone's got their own speciality. Ask everyone questions and have fun making hats. I know that sounded like I was wrapping up, but there was one more block I wanted to talk about, the front and back. Oh, I was going to show you a few things I'd been working on. I think that's everything for the actual hat blocks. I hope that all made sense. I hope that was useful. I'm certainly surprised myself that I've spent about an hour and 45 minutes chatting away about homemade hat blocks. Oh, and now I'm surrounded by hats. Oh! I've remembered what I was going to mention. How do you know where there's a front to back on an asymmetrical crown block? It's time to play. Does husband know his hat shapes? Husband, could you get me a crown block from the blocking cupboard, please? I think it's in the blocking cupboard. It's the crown block. That's just a crown block. I think it's not the dark wooden one, it's the light wooden one with all the pen marks on it because it's secondhand. You'll see why I want to show you guys this hat block in a second, because it doesn't have an obvious front and back, but I think there's a way to tell. So let's see, can my husband guess the hat block? This is fun. A couple of live streams ago I asked him to bring the bandeau block and he got it right on the second go. Oh, he's shouting at me from the cupboard.
This one?
No.
Ah.
No, a crown block. It's the dome.
Right.
In case you were interested, he brought out a halo hat block. Which is incidentally another shape that you can make in the wireframe method. So this bandeau shape isn't too... No. Wooden one. It's the wooden one. Is it not in the cupboard? Do you know what, guys? 1 second. Husband cannot guess the hat block. No, not that one. Okay, give us 1 second, guys. It's gonna turn out it's not in the cupboard, isn't it? Here it is! Oh, hey Rachel, we were just talking about you. I don't know if you caught that. We were discussing 3D printing and 3D scanning, and I think you've been working with students who were working on something like that, or you've just bought a 3D scanner for your class. Anyway, it looked high-tech and modern and exciting. So maybe you can tell people about that on your channel at some point, because I think there's some people interested in that kind of technology. I was just answering a question about the front and back of hat blocks. So here is a domed crown. So it's domed because it looks like a dome, and it does have a front and back. So let me switch camera views. So it does have, so someone's already marked on, the previous owner of the block or the previous owner of the hat block has marked on a front and back and side to side. But what do you do if you've got a new hat block and you don't know where the front and back is? Sometimes the maker of the hat block will mark an X where they think the back should be. But if you've got a vintage hat block and it's not marked on, there's no X, there's no marks on it, on the bottom. And even if there is, sometimes it's good to check. If I put it on its side, let's see, will this work? Sometimes a crown block will have a bit of a bulge on one side and be slightly flatter back on the other side. And really, it's up to you to decide whether you want this bulge to be represented at the back of the head or to the front of the head. I personally prefer this kind of higher bulge. I hope you can see what I'm talking about here. This is the higher bulge over here. Can you see the curve? It kind of slopes down, but here it goes out and then it curves fast. So this bulgy bit, if I hold it up in front of my face, I can kind of see it. I don't know if you can. But this bulgy bit, I personally put it at the back. Unless I ever come up with a design where it looks better at the front. I mean, you never know. As usual, as I always say, it's up to you. So yeah, Rachel is also answering questions in the chat. Rachel says, yes, we've been conducting research on 3D fabrication of hat blocks with a variety of different techniques and equipment. Sounds super exciting. An overview of our research will be coming out in the next issue of Theatre Design and Technology. Wow, that sounds absolutely fascinating. Rachel, is that a US only publication, or can those of us across the pond access that? Can we access it digitally? Because I would love to read about that. That sounds super exciting. While Rachel answers my rather niche question, let me show you guys what else I've been working on, and we've got 10 minutes left of the stream because I don't really want to be going for longer than 2 hours. We all probably need a break, but just in the last 10 minutes, let me show you what I've been working on, linking back to some of our previous live streams. Just a pile of hats over here. Pile of hats to my right, pile of hats to my left. There's also piles of hats by my feet. I'm surrounded by hats. Right, a couple of, actually on the first live stream, a couple of live streams ago, I was talking about this ring block. And on this ring block, I had blocked, is that going to be in everyone's way? No, that's fine, that's just a bow. I'd blocked this Buckram shape that I've covered in Demet and I've wired a bit. And the way I intend to wear this, and I haven't accommodated for a bun in this hat, this would be a hat worn with hair down, so as you can see that bun is dreadfully in the way. I'm thinking of having this one like this, and I'm thinking of covering it in a pink velvet. I think that would look really sweet. But I then thought I'd see if I had a spare brim in a straw parasisal cape plean. So I'd used the crown for something and I had a spare brim and I didn't know what to do with the brim, and I thought, okay, well, it's a spare brim, let's experiment with it, let's use it for some experiments. And I've tried to put it onto this wooden ring block, and I have struggled a bit. So the bit that's kind of at the edges that flares out the most, I really can't get it in. So I think what I'm probably going to do later is take it off the block, put a little fold in it like a pleat, and join it together. What I don't want to do is cut through it because that will completely destroy the weave. So I don't want to be doing any cuts this way. So I will put a pleat in it, and if I don't like the pleat, I'll cover the pleat in a ribbon and no one will know it's there. So that's the plan for this one. I'm still working on it. It might not happen, it might. This incidentally took me about 2.5 hours. So I actually don't think it's really worth it to do that. I then realized that this would probably be easier if I'd used a parasisal cone. So if you don't know, a cone is the kind of hat shape that is like this. This is a cone, this is a felt cone, but I want to try it in straw because I think it would look lovely like as a summer hat. But a capelline is the hat shape where it's got like a little top and then it flares out at the side. So I think, so this was a straw capelline, but if I'd used the cone, I think I might have succeeded a bit better. Karen asks, what is that block made of? This one is made of wood. It's a vintage antique block that I bought secondhand. And I do really, really like it. Oh, it's raining pins. This is wood. You can make ring blocks out of hose pipes, which I haven't tried yet, but I've read about in, I think, 3 different vintage books. So I think this would have been a popular method. In one book I have, it actually says that you could use a stocking and stuff, I'm guessing this would be like a knitted woolen stocking or something to hold its shape rather than like a hosiery nylon stocking, and stuff it with stuff the stocking with sawdust. Wow, I think I've invented a new tongue twister. Stuff the stocking with sawdust. There we go. That's what it says in one of my vintage books. And then in another vintage book it says to get a length of hose pipe and just kind of tape it together at one end and you'll get a ring block. Another way that I'd thought about doing this was getting some tubular crin. So crin is the kind of is the modern stuff. It used to be made out of horsehair, now it's made out of plastic. It's this kind of gauzy weave that's like a net, and along one side it has a string that you pull to make it into fun shapes, but you can buy it in its tubular form that you can then stuff with something like sawdust or maybe even bits of leftover felt. Cotton wool, wadding would probably work. I mean, off the top of my head, another thing you can do is get some wadding that you'd use for quilting, make that into like a tight sausage and then join that together. That would probably give you a sturdy enough wood, a ring block. So this is quite fun to experiment with, but I'm yet to actually make a proper hat out of it. So I will keep you updated on the ring block process. Now, something that I'm really excited about. I conquered it. I'm running out of space now. Here it is. For those of you who were here last stream, I tried to block this black wool felt capelline over an upturned brim block. You can kind of see the shape here. So this is the sweep up, the curve, and then this is the angle down. And I failed because the opening on the inside, when I added steam, it kind of expanded and I couldn't get it to fit inside this. But without the pressure of the live, without the pressure of the cameras on, I followed some advice that Wayne from the Haberdashery Project YouTube channel gave to me in the chat. And once again, his details will also be in the description box below if you want to go and have a look at his videos. He said to me that you can shrink felt if you get a damp tea towel and a hot iron and you kind of compress it and work it in. And I tried it and it worked. So I was then able to block on this block, and I'm not going to unblock it now because I'm not ready to put a wire in it or whatever and join it up as a hat, but yay! So thank you for your advice, Wayne, if you're watching, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. So there's been a few more questions. Karen says, can you make a block out of straw wreath? You probably could, actually, because straw is quite dense. The one thing I'd worry about with straw is if you've ever blocked a straw hood, when you put steam on the straw, it does go all soft. And so I'd worry that if you tried to block on straw, even if you'd condensed it, I'd worry that it'd go a bit soft. But then I guess so would a stocking with sawdust inside it. I don't know. I don't know enough about that, but you could try. Nothing stopping you from trying. That would be fun to know. If you do end up trying, let us know how it goes. Leave us a comment under the live stream once it's up and running. I'd love to know if that works out for you, because that sounds, I mean, that sounds like an exciting thing to try. And the more information we share about millinery, the more people we can get interesting, the more open the community becomes. We can share all our skills, we can share our techniques, share our tips and tricks, and grow millinery in the world, because let's face it, there aren't enough hat wearers in the world. We need to make hats, we need to wear hats, we need to explain hats, we need to love the hats, and obviously wear the hats. I think I've already said that. Anyway, it's been 2 hours now. It's been wonderful to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for watching. And I do believe at the beginning of the stream I said I'll be trying on lots of hats and watch my hair get messier and messier as we go. And yes, indeed, I've now got some hair flyaways, which I will go and deal with imminently. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've had a wonderful time. I've had a wonderful time. I've learnt some new things. I hope you guys have learnt some new things. Next week, I will be posting a video about 4 or 5 different ways to make a pillbox, which we can all do with and without hat blocks. So that's coming next week. The week after that will be another live stream. I'm yet to decide a topic. So if you guys have any suggestions, leave them for me either in the chat now before I log off, or you can comment later on under the video. Or you can message me on Instagram at @ByLonaMillinery if you have any suggestions. I guess that's it. See you all next time. Bye.